Visit Elmhurst.org to explore the new City of Elmhurst website. Find out the latest Elmhurst news, pay utility bills and parking tickets, report concerns, and much more. Elmhurst.org is an ideal way to discover what Elmhurst offers your business, your family, your life.
This is Elmhurst Now. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and tonight we're delighted to have with us, again for the second time, Elmhurst Mayor Steve Morley. Steve, welcome to Elmhurst Now and the opportunity to talk about all things Elmhurst, which I know you do on a very regular basis.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here.
If we can, I want to talk first about some economic questions, some economic issues, if you will,
Sure.
inside the city, and then after our break, we'll talk about perhaps some quality of life issues as identified in the recent citizen survey. So if you agree that the economy is kind of better overall, then things are generally better in Elmhurst. True statement?
Sure, absolutely it's true. We've had a couple of economic downturns over the last couple of years, certainly 2001 and again in 2007, 2008. And all you have to do is look at the revenue from the city when we're doing our budgeting. And during both of those time periods, we had significant reduction in sales tax revenue. Over the past couple of years, and certainly last year, we finalized the 2013 numbers a couple of months ago, and we had a surplus in revenue beyond projection. So we're doing very well.
Now, a question I get asked on a frequent basis, I suspect you do too, is where does the city get its budget money? First of all, the tax bills come out.
Sure.
People look at it, and I know there's a whole lot of folks that just sort of lump that together and they're paying that bill to the city, which of course the city only gets a small part of the property tax bill. But where does the rest of the revenue that funds the budget come from?
That's a good question, Ken. Out of your property tax bill, and most people do that, and I'm one of them. You write the check, and it's a lot of money, and it really comes. It looks like it comes from the city, but DuPage County collects that. The city itself gets about 9 pennies out of every dollar that goes into that. The rest is divided up under other municipal or other taxing bodies. But we get money certainly from property tax. We get a significant amount of money from sales tax in town. We're a home rule sales tax, or a home rule community, so we have a food and beverage tax and hotel tax, stuff like that we're allowed to charge locally. So we get some of those dollars, and then the sales tax that the state charges, we get what's called a local distributive fund. We actually get money back from the state. So I think the state tax rate is 7%, and we get one of that 7% returned back to us, and that's where we get the most of our money. And that actually happens to be a kind of a political football every year between the municipalities and Springfield, is making sure that we get the amount of money that we're expecting, and that helps us balance our books.
Now, if you will, the Great Recession of 2008 or 9 or whenever it is you want to assign the time period to, with the effect on the car dealerships in particular. I know there was a lot of writing and conversation about the fact that Elmhurst was so dependent on our really excellent collection of car dealerships that we were hurt to a very great degree by the downturn in the economy and if you will, people weren't buying cars. Now, there's no question that has bounced back. That's been back for a while. But are we just as dependent as we were prior, or have things diversified a little bit?
That's one of the things that we've tried to do, is diversify as much as possible. We're not going to turn down any car dealership that comes into town. In fact, car dealerships or nameplates, whatever you want to call them, cluster together for a specific reason. Because if somebody's in the market, they're not going to drive 20 miles in the middle of nowhere just to go see one type of car. If they're in that buying mode, they're going to want to come to what we call an auto mall or a car mall, and that's what we have here in Elmhurst. So You know, Elmhurst is has a very strong economic climate, and some of the car dealerships shake out when they're having a rough time. But the strong ones, like the ones on Lake Street and the ones on Grand, they do what they need to do to survive, and they come out better for it. But it's our job as a city not to be necessarily reliant on that, but diversify as much as possible. So some new car dealerships have come into town. That's great. There's a new truck line that came into town recently on Grand Avenue. Wilkins brought in a new line a couple of years ago, and we recently brought in a motorcycle dealer. Right. So diversifying within that and having individually more individual nameplates, so we're not dependent, let's say, on 4 different dealers. If we have 18 dealers or so, that allows you to weather those economic storms a little better. In addition to other businesses that we can bring into town that will generate taxes and smooth that out even when we have rough periods. So the biggest one to point to would be Mariano's. That's part of the North York redevelopment, and that's a big tax generator for us, and that's something that smooths that out so that we're not as dependent on the car dealers as we were in the past.
Switching gears a little bit, the cities with what I would call identifiable and legitimate downtowns, Elmhurst certainly being a good example of that. The trend has been away from majority of retail and far more towards restaurants and entertainment. That trend's not only in the region, but it's a national trend for communities the size of Elmhurst. How does that whole thing strike you as mayor?
Well, you know, the traditional downtown that maybe we were used to 40, 50 years ago has evolved. Things really don't ever stay the same. When you have superstores, giant stores like Walmart or Target or Meijer that exist kind of on the fringes outside of town, they're going to drain some of that retail that used to be in town. So when I was growing up, there was Sukups. And downtown there was Chopin Sporting Goods. And those tiny little mom and pops really will have a difficult time providing the selection that something of, let's say, Dick's Sporting Goods does. So it evolves. The market evolves over time. And one of the things you see in communities like ours, mature communities, is they do start creating destination locations. And we're very fortunate to, like I said, we have a robust business client. We're very business friendly. So when those vacancies open up, the free market kind of fills them. So I remember not so long ago, the south end of the tracks, just where 100 South is, they were struggling. And now it's its own little center down there. And that's just happened in the last 4 or 5 years. And that's great. I think what you're going to see is with the density that maybe, or traffic that some of those restaurants create, I think you're going to see retail creep back in a little bit. Maybe not to the extent like it was when I was a little kid growing up here in town and every single store was retail, but I think you're going to see it creep back in a little bit. The other challenge that we face uniquely to Elmhurst is that we're within the 5-mile footprint of Oak Brook. And so we really aren't going to get, we're excluded from a lot of national chains, whether it's the Gap or companies like that, from locating in Elmhurst because we're within that footprint and it's being serviced by Oak Brook.
The Addison parking deck may add to the spice of drawing additional retail folks too, not to mention entertainment and restaurants.
Yeah, the Addison parking deck that you referred to has been on the table actually was originally on the table when Tom Marcucci was mayor. And it addresses a couple of things. Certainly, I think a lot of us anecdotally always thought that there was a tough time finding parking downtown Elmhurst at certain times. But we've actually done a parking study, and there is parking deficits at certain day parts. There are parking deficits in town. In addition, if we want to develop and redevelop certain areas of downtown Elmhurst, we have to show, because we don't have a parking requirement for buildings in downtown Elmhurst. We have to show people who want to invest maybe in building in downtown Elmhurst that we're going to give them a place to park. I think we have the opportunity of not just having one corridor in downtown Elmhurst, which is York Road, being a center, but we actually have an opportunity of making Addison similar. in terms of a destination and growth. And I believe that that parking deck is the first step. I can tell you there's been significant activity in some of the properties around that Addison corridor, a couple of properties that are in the process of being sold and being redeveloped. And I specifically sat down with a business that was interested in moving into town, and in the first 5 minutes of the meeting, they said part of the reason why we're here is because that parking deck is less than a block away, and that's something that I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I've heard that as well, and I don't think there's any question that is true. 4 TIF districts, tax instrument financing districts in town. 3 relatively mature, TIF 4, the North York that you mentioned a few minutes ago. It's easy to lose track of this, but TIF 2, which is the Lake Street TIF, actually is going to expire first, and I think it's 2015 or 2016 is my memory is telling me. And then TIF 1, not a whole lot after that. With these expiring TIFs, maturing TIFs, whatever the proper word is, what's that mean for the larger community to have these TIFs, if you will, go off the books?
Well, as you're aware, TIF is a financial tool that the state of Illinois allows us to use to provide incentives to businesses to come into town. As much as people want to say, hey, Elmhurst is a great town, this business should come here regardless, the fact of the matter is that we're in competition every day with other similar communities, whether it's Oak Brook or Glen Ellen or Hinsdale or Downers Grove, you name it. We want that business to come to town. That's the reason why the TIFs are created in the first place. And you're right, we have 3 TIFs that are maturing. We're going to have to figure out another way to provide incentives or lure businesses into town. Now, TIF 1, for example, has about 6.5, 7 years left on it. And that TIF, and by the way, TIF law and TIF legislation changes almost on a yearly basis down in Springfield. Yes. It's an interesting playing field. But TIF 1 actually had it had a regular TIF, and then it had a sales tax TIF overlaid on it. And there was actually restrictions on that sales tax TIF that we couldn't actually declare a surplus or distribute a surplus to our fellow taxing bodies. Otherwise, we would have to given back all of the sales tax TIF increment that we had gained over the life of that. So it really didn't make any financial sense. Well, that sales tax TIF expires, I believe it's this year. So starting next year, we're going to actually start some serious surplus distributions to our fellow taxing bodies out of TIF 1. These are real dollars. It's going to be, I think, over the next 6 years, the schools will get somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 or $10 million that they're not enjoying now. And certainly the parks and the other taxing bodies will get some of that. The taxing bodies, as it relates to TIF 1, they're going to start getting almost their full increment starting in about a year. But it will affect us. You know, we have a very successful TIF-sponsored program in town called the Retail Grant Program. It's one of my favorite. I was on that committee when I first got on the council, and it was one of my favorite things to do. New businesses coming into town, they present their business plan, and we give them a little bit of an incentive, $10,000. And people say, well, how much is that really? And I said, well, it's $10,000 they don't have.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I also think it's a real benefit to Elmhurst if we have an open storefront, there's a big poster in that storefront that says, hey, you could qualify for $10,000. That really tells businesses that are looking to relocate in Elmhurst that we're serious about them and we want them to come to our town. So that's one thing that would go away when that TIF expires. And that's something we're really going to have to take a close look at to make sure that we stay competitive with other towns in bringing businesses into town.
Before we go to break, I have one question that sort of goes outside the city limits, and that is, I know that you've been involved with the whole discussion of the western access to O'Hare. What, in the broad context of things, how does that affect Elmhurst in your view?
Well, it's been on the books, I think, for over 10 years, this western expansion. You know, the joke is there's the Elgin-O'Hare Expressway that doesn't go to Elgin or O'Hare. Right. And when it's completed, it's a $3.6 billion project, federally funded. The Fed's going to fund 3.3 of it, and the local communities have to come up with the other $300 million, of which I think the local community, including Elmhurst and everybody, has come up with about $120 million. So we're covering that gap. How it relates to Elmhurst, very specifically, we actually are on the books. We're part of the plan for a slip ramp. So if you're coming from O'Hare south on 294, it used to be well, still is very complicated when you exit off of North Avenue, depending on where you want to go. The slip ramp, it's just a fancy name for an exit ramp. If you're coming south on 294, it will actually allow you to exit onto County Line Road, up there where the FedEx is, exit onto County Line Road. More importantly, for those big rigs, those truck drivers who have those 18-wheelers, right now they don't have an opportunity to go east on North Avenue. They have to either go through a very complicated way on the highways, or they actually have to come into Elmhurst and figure out how to turn around before they go east into North Lake. This addresses that. This allows truck drivers and truck deliveries to go directly into North Lake, the ones that need to go there. But also importantly, I talked about the North York corridor and how we're trying to redevelop that area. Really goes from basically Hamburger Heaven all the way up to Grand Avenue in York. This exit actually comes out not too far from there. So it's going to give us an opportunity to pull traffic and maybe take them over to that auto mall I talked about, or to Mariano's or any other part along that North York corridor. So that's probably the biggest impact as it relates to York, as it relates to Elmhurst. There's also some reconfiguration with the with O'Hare itself, where they're going to add a couple of new runways, and hopefully we'll see a little more east to west traffic instead of north to south. That really affects Elmhurst. But the exit ramp off of 294, it's something that we've been battling with in Elmhurst. I know Alderman Susan Rose, she was on the council for 20 years. And it's one of the reasons why she ran 20 some odd years ago. So we've made a little bit of progress on that, but this is really going to help.
Okay. With that, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we'll talk about some quality of life issues.
Sounds good.
We're talking with Elmhurst Mayor Steve Morley on Elmhurst Now. We'll be right back.
The Elmhurst Historical Museum, located in downtown Elmhurst, is proud to present award-winning exhibits for visitors of all ages. Our Adult Tea Time Talk series, family programs, and special events make learning about history interesting and fun. Admission is free, and on-site parking is available. Visit the Elmhurst Historical Museum soon. Call us today, or go to our website for the latest program details.
Welcome back to Elmhurst Now. We're with Steve Morley, the mayor of Elmhurst. And Steve, in this Family Circle magazine, on page 88, there's a town there that you would recognize called Elmhurst. And the city was in the top 10 nationally of places to raise a family. How's that make the mayor feel?
Oh, it's terrific. I mean, it's an honor just to be associated with Elmhurst. And you know, I kind of tell people, they're telling people what we already in Elmhurst know, but it is truly a great honor, and it shows that, you know, and they mention a whole bunch of stuff in there about why Elmhurst is a great place to live, and it's not just the city, it's the parks and the schools, and it was great. I mean, I think Family Circle's been around for 50 plus years, so they must know what they're doing. And to rank us as one of the top 10 to raise a family, and that's the other part that I liked about it. It wasn't just a great city, it's a great place to raise a family.
One of the things I liked about it was that they found us. We didn't, it wasn't those things where compete, submit your information and see if you win. They did all that work. And criteria, overall quality, location, schools, financial stability, access to health care, low crime, all the things, as you said, we already know. But, a great honor for the city without question. Also recently, the city received the results of its every other year citizen survey, and among the usual commentary was, gee, the taxes are too high and there's too much too much transportation issues and traffic and whatnot all. But at the same time, an issue called stormwater surfaced as a growing concern, more so than it has been in the past. And I wonder if you just want to take a couple of minutes and update our audience on kind of where that stormwater issue is right now.
Sure. As you mentioned, Ken, we do this survey every 2 years. I think we send out surveys to about 1,600 homes, and we send them out randomly so that one individual, let's say a vocal minority, doesn't have an overwhelming influence on the results. This year, I think we've got almost 45% respondent, which is unbelievable in the marketing world.
Yeah.
You're usually happy with a 10% response.
Consistent. This survey is
consistently over
high,
40%.
but you're absolutely right.
And I think that shows that the citizens of Elmhurst care about Elmhurst, and that they want their input to be heard. For the most part, the survey was very positive, like where they live,
Yep.
and very positive on city services, an uptick on almost everything. One of the more recent things, Chief Ruth, our police chief, he's been in the job, I think, about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, and he's really made a concerted effort to get the police force to interact with the community. He's actually doing on-the-street roll calls during this summer and getting great reviews, and that's noted in the surveys. But the two things in the survey of note where citizens have issues, if you will, would be the streets and the flooding. And the streets, we've had a couple of really rough winters. In fact, this last winter, we had so much freezing and thawing that the streets were just in horrible shape when spring rolled around. Elmhurst has about 100 miles of streets. They have approximately a 20-year lifespan, and we try to replace streets 5 miles a year. So over a 20-year lifespan, we'll replace all the streets in Elmhurst. Because of the healthy economic news you mentioned earlier, we actually have expanded our street resurfacing. I think the plan is to go maybe from 5 miles to 6 or 7 miles this year, because we can afford to do so and make up for some of the damage that was caused by the storms and the rough winter. And we're also increasing our concrete street budget by almost 50%. I know Alderman Polumsky and Alderman Dunn, I think, were ones who put through a referral to see if we could work on our concrete streets, and we're happy that we can do that. As it relates to flooding, that's just a challenging issue. What's interesting is historically, if you go back and look at meeting minutes from town councils all the way back to the 30s, there is constant talk about flooding and flood mitigation. We've made some great strides early on. Since 2010, we've had very significant storms, maybe 5 that qualify as a certain level of storm that we typically don't see. But really what that does is highlight some of the problem areas in town. The first thing, one of the biggest things we did is the Southwest Wet Weather Project. And that's really, it's a redoing, reconstruction and addition of some sewer pipes in the south end of town, and also some construction over at our wastewater treatment plant. And it's about a $10 million project, should be completed within the next year, and it's going to positively affect over 2,300 homes. That's one of the things that we're working on right now, and we felt, water in the basement's bad, sewer water in the basement's even worse. That's the first one we did. And recently we've passed some zoning and some construction requirements, so that if you're going to build a new home in town, or if you're going to build an addition, you actually have to mitigate or compensate for any sort of runoff that you've created off of your property. That's not something that is going to have an impact on the town maybe this year or next year, but over the next 15 years, if we put in 2,500 new homes and each new home has an additional 450 cubic feet of storage on site, we're going to see an impact to that. So there really is no magic answer, no silver bullet that's going to correct this, but every little thing we can do, we're trying to do. There's a couple of big projects out there. The city of Elmhurst hired, this was about 4 years ago, Burke Engineering. They're the stormwater guru of DuPage County. And we hired them for significant dollars, and along with RJN, who studied our sewer system. Burke did the stormwater, and they came up with a plan for utilizing green space in town. Now, one of the downsides of being a mature community is we don't have a lot of green space in town, and certainly some of the green space might be on a hill, so it's not usable. For example, Butterfield Park. A lot of green space there, not really usable because it's one of the higher points in town. But we do have some green space that's available that's near some of these flooding areas, these chronic flooding areas, that if engineered and designed properly, will be able to relieve some of the flooding. So most recently, there's about 10 places in town. The properties are either controlled by the schools, District 205, or by the Park District, Elmhurst Park District. 10 different locations, done a lot of studying. We've actually been meeting with the schools and the parks quite a bit over the last year. We've been working on stormwater for 4 or 5 years, but if they're going to be part of the solution, we had to bring them in and educate them, and we've been meeting with them over the past year. So now, most recently, the burden of a lot of this has fallen on our Public Works Committee. Jim Kennedy, Alderman Jim Kennedy, he's the chairman, Chris Healy's the vice chairman, and they recently prioritized 4 projects out of the 10 that Burke highlighted that they think we should move forward with. So there's 2 projects that affect us or involve the schools, and 2 projects that involve the parks. The 2 for the schools are Madison Early Development Center over there on Madison, and that the park, the baseball fields or softball fields on the west side of Bryan Junior High.
Right.
And then as it relates to the Park District, Golden Meadows, which is on the east side of town, just south of East End, and what's the other one? York Commons. And basically, all of the projects are the same concept, which is you take a grass field, so in the case of, let's say, Bryan Junior High. On the west side of Bryan Junior High, there's 2 softball fields or baseball fields that are on that field. The plan is to take those fields and lower them about 6 to 8 feet. Basically, we're creating a grass dish that during significant storms, not during every storm, but during the significant storms that we've seen in the past 5 years, the overflow, instead of going into people's basements, the overflow of that clean water, that storm water, would go into these lowered playing fields, and they would be detained, not retained for a long period of time, but detained for 24 to 48 hours. One of my friends on the school board calculated it was something like, if we did what we wanted to do, I think it would be 18 days that these playing surfaces would be affected over the past 5 years. In essence, what it is you take a ball field, and our plan would be to lower that ball field 6 to 8 feet on a 4-to-1 slope. So for every 4 feet this way, you go down 1. It's a gentle slope. And we would take what's there and we would make it better. So if there's a baseball field there, we replace all the equipment with brand new equipment, and actually the drainage in the field would be better. So our intent would actually be to not only, it's to create dual purpose. So it would have the ability to help mitigate some of the water, the flooding that we experience, but then also to recreate the playing field that's there and actually make that a little better. So you would actually get more playing days because of the sophisticated drainage system that we put underneath. So we've prioritized 4 projects. City Council just unanimously 14, or I think it was 12-0. There was a couple folks on vacation. Supported moving forward with that, and have instructed the city manager and the mayor to write letters to parks and schools and ask them to commit to this, because we're at a phase right now where we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on engineering, and we don't want to spend that amount of money until we have a commitment from those other governmental bodies.
To use their facilities or their land. I think it's always kind of interesting, having lived in town a long time, and obviously you have as well. The city's credibility on flooding issues. I mean, as you correctly state, it's been around forever. But the city's credibility on constantly looking for solutions to the immediate problems. The creek was a problem for decades, and then the creek got solved after the '87 flood because the city said we can't have this. And we're kind of at the same point now with kind of the overland flooding or the very unusual rain events. And that's a credibility that sometimes people don't take into account, in my opinion.
Well, and the other thing is, if you look at these projects on an individual basis, I don't think you're doing justice to the problem that we're facing. Addressing these flooding issues might pull 140 homes out of a flood issue, but really what you're doing is those 140 homes that you're helping, the fact that you're doing something to mitigate this flooding, it really affects all of Elmhurst. There's 14,500 homes in Elmhurst, and we're all affected by flooding. When Elmhurst floods, Elmhurst floods. They don't go around and say only these 350 homes or only these 450 homes flooded, and we're working very hard to correct that. And I think people and communities outside of Elmhurst, people looking to move into Elmhurst, need to understand that we're committed to do that.
The elevator speech for the mayor of Elmhurst. Somebody's never been here, you meet him on an elevator maybe. What's the elevator speech sound like?
Well, I actually bumped into somebody at the, I'll answer it in just a minute, at the bike race we had. We just had that Elmhurst Classic bike race.
We had Tim on Elmhurst Now a few months ago.
Tim Radcliffe, great guy. There was a rider who came in, he was from Deerfield, and he happened to be riding his bike. He had been in the race, and he said, "Hey, are you the mayor?" I said, "Yeah, thanks for coming to town. Great to see you." He goes, "I got to tell you, this town is great. I didn't know." And the bike race actually highlights Elmhurst College. It's right next to Wilder Park, which is beautiful. And this gentleman, I think, took the opportunity to take his bike downtown to City Center, and he just couldn't have been more complimentary. And he almost gave me the elevator speech on Elmhurst, which was nice. But when people ask me, I tell them the truth, which is, but it might sound cliche, but it's true. Elmhurst is greater than the sum of its parts. You really have to be here to understand that. But we've got an art museum, we've got a historical museum, we've got a historic downtown, we've got 4 or 5 different business districts, we've got a state-of-the-art hospital, terrific parks, great schools, award-winning schools, and when you just keep adding all of that up, and it just makes Elmhurst a fantastic town. And I do take the opportunity, Ken, especially when I'm outside of Elmhurst, to brag a little bit about it.
Well, I certainly would have expected that, and the elevator speech absolutely covers it, and as did Family Circle when they used their criteria. We're almost out of time, but I always like to give the mayor an opportunity to say whatever it is he might like to say to the audience, which is not exclusively Elmhurst, but greatly Elmhurst.
Well, to the people who aren't from Elmhurst, I would certainly invite you all to come to Elmhurst and experience all of the things that we have to offer. We've been talking about now for a half hour what a great town it is, so come on and experience it for yourself. To the citizens of Elmhurst, all I can say, it's my great pleasure to be mayor of this town. Truly humbling, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And don't be a stranger. If you see me downtown, please stop, introduce yourself, and say hello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ken. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You've been watching Elmhurst Now. For Mayor Steve Morley, I'm Ken Bartels. Good evening.
The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the Churchville Schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the Civil War era. Students of today walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm of the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville Schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons. And children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are practiced, and students test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess featuring games of the early 1900s. The schoolhouse is a popular place for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can also be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History Program is operated by the Elmhurst Historical Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information. Call 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. The Churchville Schoolhouse is waiting to open the doors for your school or community group. Plan a memorable learning experience today for the best education in history.
We live in some of the best communities in Illinois. We care about our neighbors. We work hard to preserve our quality of life. But there's something we forget about in Elmhurst. A river runs through it, and it's up to us to protect it. Our storm drains flow to Salt Creek, and that means our harmful waste does too. So try using fewer chemicals on your lawn. Avoid leaking fluids from cars. And grow native flowers and plants to absorb more rainwater. Don't muddy the waters. Do your part to clean up Salt Creek.